Hey guys, Heidi Preeb here. For the past couple of months on this channel, we've been talking a lot about how to identify your own attachment style. So by this point, if you've been following along, you probably have a decent idea of what category you fall into, whether it's secure, avoidant, fearful avoidant, or anxious. And you might have an idea of where your partner falls on that scale as well. So in this video, what I wanted to do was start giving us some hands-on, concrete tools for navigating difficult parts of relationships based on attachment theory. Because in my opinion, that is what we should always be using attachment theory for, right? It's not about just identifying ourselves and analyzing ourselves. It's about making our lives and our relationships better. And when we become aware of the way that other people operate that's different from the way that we operate, it gets a lot easier to communicate with each other and to resolve difficult issues. So a lot of the time when you have two insecurely attached people in one relationship, there are a lot of triggers that go off around conflict, and what ends up happening is that you end up kind of arguing around the issue rather than actually dealing with the core problem. So you can have an argument that lasts for 3 hours, 3 weeks, 3 years, and never actually get down to the heart of what the difference of opinion is or what the different needs are. So what I want you guys to use these videos to do is to clear as much of that clutter as possible away from the conversation so that you can get down to the heart of what actually matters. Now, I want to note that a lot of the tactics that I'm going to suggest in this video are secure tactics. So what that means is that they are going to come most easily to people who have both a strong ability to self-regulate intense situations, and who also have a very high threshold for listening and staying present with the emotional experiences of others and responding emotionally and empathetically to them. So if you are not securely attached, these tools might take a lot of work on your behalf. They might take some honing and some refining, and there might be a lot of trigger management that you have to do with yourself and your own attachment system to get to the place where these tools come more naturally. And that's totally okay. So as we walk through this video, try to put yourself in the situation, right? So think, would I be able to respond in this way if my anxiously attached partner came to me with X, Y, or Z issue? And anytime you feel like you're getting kind of either activated or feeling like you would want to shut down in that situation, just notice that, because that's where the work needs to be done on your behalf, right? So again, this isn't about winning the conflict, and it's also not about just folding and giving your partner everything they want at the expense of what you want. It's about making sure that you are working with the actual issues at hand and not getting distracted from the issue or thrown completely off course or starting an entirely new fight because triggers are going off left, right, and center and you can't stay on track. So the number one thing that you need to keep in mind if you are in conflict with an anxiously attached person is that they are going to have a very large fear of abandonment that is very present and very on the surface for them. And if you are able to have the conflict in such a way that they don't fear getting abandoned throughout the course of the conflict, it is going to go about 1,000 times more smoothly. Now, can you control how someone else feels? Of course not. But what we're going to talk about is certain things you can say and do that might be able to soothe that fear of abandonment as you move through the conflict so that they're not as activated during the conflict and both of you are able to actually stay present and say what you need to say. So step number one in having a conflict with an anxiously attached person is name the conflict for what it is and set a statement of intent. A lot of the time, when you go into conflict with an anxiously attached person, they immediately will start to feel like, is this the relationship ending? Am I being abandoned? What's happening here? It can feel very unsettling. So if you make it clear right from the get-go, hey, I want us to have a conversation about this. Or, hey, I've noticed that things are getting kind of heated. I want us to be able to stop for a moment and just look at what we're dealing with here. Here's the problem that I see us getting into. I want to be able to resolve this with you because our relationship really matters to me, or because you're someone who I really respect and what you're feeling and thinking matters to me. So phrases that work really well. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not trying to abandon you. I want to reassure you that I'm going to be here to work this through, but I might need to have some ground rules around how we have this conversation. Which leads us to point number 2, which is set very clear boundaries and stick to them. So step 1 is all about making things non-ambiguous so that you both understand what page you're on. But step 2 is about being aware of and managing your own conflict triggers, right? So this is going to look very different depending on what your attachment style is. If you're avoidant, you might get really triggered if, let's say, you're getting blamed for something, you're being told what to do. If you're fearful avoidant, you might also have a fear of abandonment on the surface, or you might have the avoidant fear of engulfment present for you. So before going into a conflict, so a great time to do this would be right now, as soon as you finish watching this video, you're going to want to sit down and think about what tends to come up for me in high conflict situations, particularly with the anxiously attached person in my life. So where do I want to shut down? Where do I want to lash out? And figure out what those trigger points are for you. And at this point in the conversation, you want to set some boundaries around them. So you can let them know, I might get really upset if I feel like I'm being blamed for something, and it might be hard for me to continue the conversation in good faith. In that situation, I might need to take a walk, cool down, and come back to the conversation in a couple of hours. Or I might need some time to think. I might need to take some space for 24 hours and then come back to the conversation once I've had some time to root through my own thoughts. So you need to be very clear going in on what your triggers are, what helps you calm down or return to equilibrium once that trigger goes off, and you need to be able to communicate your boundary around it. So what you will do if that trigger goes off for you in order to allow you to move through the conversation in a way that doesn't make it worse, right? So there's like a year of my own life where I would have this very intense trigger around getting blamed for something. And if I felt like I was being blamed for something that was unfair, there was absolutely no hope of the conversation going into a better place from there, right? So I learned as soon as that trigger comes up for me, I need to disengage, take an hour, take 24 hours, whatever it is, let my partner know I'll be back and back online and ready to talk about this again at a designated point in time, right? But for now, I know I'm only going to get more triggered and this conversation is going to go to a worse and worse place if I keep engaging. And sometimes that's all you can do, right? And the more that you do attachment work and attachment healing, the more present you're able to stay even when those triggers go off. So in a year or so, you may no longer need to take that space, but be really realistic with yourself about what your triggers are, when they come up for you, and what you need in that situation. And the reason this is important is because if a trigger comes up for you and you know you need to disengage all of a sudden, but you haven't made it clear at the beginning of the conversation that that might happen, the anxiously attached person doesn't understand what's going on. And they might feel like, oh my God, they're shutting down, they're taking space, they're storming out maybe. Does that mean that they're leaving me? Does that mean they're never gonna call me again? Does that mean I'm being abandoned? And when that fear of abandonment is triggered, the anxiously attached person's impulse is to kind of up the ante and try to get closer and closer. And that's going to trigger you further and further, right? So it really helps everyone from the get-go. If you're aware of what your triggers are, you lay down your boundaries around them and you let them know, I want to see this conflict through to the end, but if X, Y, or Z happens, I might need to put it on hold for a period of time so that I can come back to it in a more productive way. It's kind of like, and I don't know if this is a great example because it's not like our partners are our children, but when we're triggered, regardless of our attachment styles, we are all kind of children. Like we're operating from these very childlike places in ourselves. It's kind of like if you have a child who really wants a snack, they're really hungry, but for whatever reason you have to hold off for a little bit, maybe you don't have any on you, whatever it is. If you just tell them not right now, not right now, not right now, they're gonna start freaking out because they don't know when they're getting their need met, right? But if you tell them, in 45 minutes we're gonna be home and I can make you a snack, that allows them to calm down because they know what's going to happen and they can plan for it. So predictability has returned to their worldview, right? And that's the same thing that we do when we let our partners know, I'm triggered, here's the period of time that I'm requesting to take, and we will return to this conflict after that period of time. It allows the nervous system to relax because they know that their need is going to get met. It's just a matter of when, not if. So step 3, and this is the most important one if you have an anxiously attached partner, is really focus on the emotion that's present in the conversation. Don't try to immediately address the logic, and definitely don't try to dispute their logic before you have acknowledged their emotion. And so this is the biggest difference, particularly between the avoidant and the anxious type, is that the anxious type relies on distorted emotion. So when they feel something, they kind of fit the logic around it, versus the avoidant relies on distorted logic. So when they think something makes sense, they try to fit the way that they feel around it. So often when you have a more avoidant-leaning partner and a more anxious-leaning partner, the anxious person will present with a lot of emotion, and the avoidant person might go, wait a minute, the logic doesn't quite make sense there. Let me help you sort out the logic, and then your feelings will change. But for the anxiously attached person, that's not the way that it works. So you have to understand that they have a different way of processing both emotion and logic. So if you're able to kind of step into their worldview temporarily and understand how they're coming to the conclusions that they're coming to, which requires taking their emotional state into account, conflict is going to go a lot more smoothly, okay? So I'm gonna give an example of what this looks like. So very early on in life, anxiously attached children learned that their emotions were a pretty good predictor of what was going on in their environment. So if they felt stressed out, it was probably because there was a lot of stress around them. If they felt sad, it was probably because no one was attending to them. So they learned in their mind to kind of pair their emotional state with what was going on outside of them. And so in the mind of the adult anxiously attached individual, this is still kind of how the world operates. They figure if I feel really stressed out, if I feel really negative, if I feel really happy, it must be because something in my environment is causing me to feel stressed out or happy or whatever it is. And a lot of the time, this is right? They have a natural awareness of the fact that yes, the world around us impacts the way that we feel, but they don't always know that certain emotional states can actually arise from inside based on triggers from our environment. So this can get us into dicey situations because the anxiously attached person can learn if I'm feeling a certain way, it must be because something is going on in my environment that is causing me to feel that way. And they can make false attributions. And I think that a lot of conflict ends up happening between anxiously attached people and avoidantly attached people in particular when the anxiously attached person makes a false attribution. So an example of this might be, let's say they wake up one morning and they check social media and they see a really unflattering picture of themselves that someone else has posted. And now there's this feeling of insecurity really present in their psyche. And as they go through their day, they aren't necessarily aware on a conscious level that that's what's happening, and that they're kind of filtering the entire world that day through the lens of feeling insecure. Now, let's say they go on social media again later that day, and they see that you have liked the photo of someone who is, let's say, a friend of yours who is of the gender or sex that you're attracted to. Now, that feeling of insecurity that's been super present and on the surface for them all day might suddenly get paired in their mind with the fact that you like that photo. So on a normal day where they weren't feeling triggered, maybe that would annoy them a little bit, but they'd kind of let it go. But today, because this unconscious trigger has kind of been operating just under the surface of their awareness all day, now the second they have something in reality to attach it to, it feels like, of course, that's it. I feel super insecure because my partner liked this photo, right? And now they might approach you kind of guns blazing, going, I knew it. I know you're attracted to that person. I've known this whole time. You're going to leave me for them. You're going to have an affair. And this might, to you, feel like it's coming out of absolutely nowhere because maybe you were just liking that photo to be nice or because you like the caption or whatever it is. And so your instinct might be either to defend yourself or to shut down, disengage, and go, I'm not dealing with that at all. Because in your mind, you might be thinking, well, I'm not attracted to that friend. I didn't like that photo because we're having an affair. The logic of this does not check out, so I'm not going to engage with this poor logic. Or you might try to argue the logic, right? But you need to keep in mind that for the anxiously attached person, they believe that because they feel so strongly, it must be because something's going on, right? There's no way they would be feeling that strongly if it weren't for a really painful thing that were truly happening in their environment. So maybe their logic is wrong and you can recognize that, but their feeling is real. And probably the feeling that they're feeling is very old. They may have felt insecure their entire lives about the way they look or the way that they show up in the world in some way. And if you're telling them what you're saying makes no sense, what you might be trying to communicate is that you are incorrect about what you believe that I am perceiving, but what they're going to hear is your feeling is not real. And the feeling that they're feeling is very real, right? Their nervous system is on fire at this point. So because they've paired their emotion and the action that you've taken, they now think that if you deny the action, you're denying their emotion. So the way to kind of circumnavigate this without it flying off course and getting worse is to acknowledge their feeling without agreeing to the logic, okay? And this is a massive hack, massive hack for arguing with people who have an anxious attachment style, because what they really want is to have their pain seen. The logic behind it is actually not as important to them. It might be what you're focusing on the most heavily, but to them, that's the least important part. What they want is to be seen in their pain and to know that they're not going to be abandoned. So there are a few ways that you can approach this. One might be to speak about the situation hypothetically and acknowledge their pain around it. So for example, saying, I hear that you are worried I'm attracted to that friend and that I'm having an affair with them. Of course, you would be really upset if you thought that. I would be gutted if I thought that you were having an affair. I would be furious. I would be really stressed out. But that's actually not what's happening at all. I really care about you. I really care about our relationship. And I really want to stay with you. I'm not trying to leave you for anyone else, right? Most of that sentence was emotion-based. Only a small part of it was acknowledging what's actually happening. But what's important is that you validate the way that they're feeling. Because what they think you're saying, if you just argue the logic, is I'm having an affair and you're crazy for being upset about it, right? But if you're able to say, yes, if that were happening, it makes sense that you would be upset about it. Now they feel like their pain is being seen and that it's validated, right? But notice that you're not agreeing to the reasoning itself, right? You're able to parse those two things apart a little bit for them in a way that they're not able to in their own mind when they're triggered. And what you want to do at this phase, as much as possible, is really figure out what is the pain, what is the fear that's at the root of this, right? They might come to you with all of this convoluted logic about how they think you're cheating on them or whatever it is, but at the base of that, there's something else. Maybe there's something they feel insecure about within your relationship, and I guarantee you that if that feeling that's at the core changes for them through the course of your conversation, even if it's only being temporarily soothed, it will get you on a much better track. Much better. So this step is literally just about dropping everything and focusing on the emotion. Sometimes it can help just to directly mirror them. So if they're coming to you saying, hey, I'm so angry about this. Hey, okay, I hear that you're feeling super angry about this. What else can you tell me? Well, I just think that you don't love me and you've always had a thing for her. Okay, I'm hearing you say that you have doubts about how much I love you and that you're afraid that I have feelings for someone else. That would be really painful to feel. What else? And as soon as they can see that you are calm, you're regulated, and you're listening to them, and you're absorbing what they're saying, you don't have to agree with them. All you have to do at certain points is mirror back to them what they're saying, so they know that their pain is being acknowledged. If you can do that enough times that you eventually get down to the root of what's upsetting them and what the real insecurity is, and you work with that, now you're dealing with the real issue, right? But to get there requires step number 4, which is being extremely diligent about staying on topic. So what you need to not do is follow any false trains of reasoning, right? So let's say accusations from the past start coming up, like, oh, last year you went to her birthday party and you posted photos and it made it look like I wasn't even your partner. Okay, so I hear that you're upset about this thing that happened last year around this person's birthday. I really care about that and I want to talk to you about it, but I want to keep us on track with this conversation. So can we make an appointment? Can we set a time to return to that conversation to make sure that we resolve it? And in the meantime, can we keep our focus on what's happening today and this particular instance? And I'm going to say there is a very strong chance that these things that get thrown out in conversation, it's not that they don't necessarily hurt, but often they're kind of red herrings, like they're kind of thrown in there to just further a point and serve as a further representation of the feeling that's present for the anxiously attached person. So if you can validate that there's a feeling around what they're saying, that they want to resolve, and agree that you'll work with them to resolve it at another point in time, that's going to soothe that feeling a little bit, right? Because again, they feel like, okay, I'm going to be seen, I'm going to be heard, I'm going to be listened to. And I'm going to say there's a pretty good chance that that conversation might be one that they don't actually need to have, right? They just need to know that you'd be willing to have it with them. But you telling them anything along the lines of like, that's stupid, I'm not going to discuss it with you, again, what they're hearing you say is your feelings are not real, and that's likely to be super triggering for them. So if things get off topic, setting up a time and date to talk about those different things, and then actually coming back to them at the time and date that you set up and saying, hey, is now a good time to talk about this, is going to go a really long way in building trust in your relationship. And the more that the anxiously attached person trusts you to show up, take them seriously, and be sensitive to their needs, but with firm boundaries around yourself so that you're not giving too much of yourself, the more they're going to learn, okay, this person is not going anywhere, conflict doesn't mean abandonment, and you can start to relax a little bit and actually start working with the issues that are happening for you. So what you want to make sure you're doing is anytime the conversation gets off track, bring it back to the issue at hand, but reassure your partner that anything else that they're struggling with, you will deal with at a specific concrete point in time. Making those appointments and then showing up for them is going to be really good in building trust, and also means that you're going to be having important conversations at times when you're both feeling a lot more calm and regulated, not necessarily addressing these giant things in the moment when someone gets really angry and blows up. Right? Often in conflict, things come up that are impacting the relationship and have been for a while, but that nobody's brought up. So if you can actually make dates and appointments to talk about those things, it's going to be super helpful. Now you know what the problems are, right? And you can make a plan to work on them. And I also want to acknowledge at this point that not everything the anxiously attached person brings up is untrue or is just a projection of their insecurities, right? Often there are real problems in the relationship, but by the time you get to this place where everyone is heated and upset, it's probably going to be hard for them to present those issues clearly and calmly and in an unbiased way, okay? So you want to make sure that you're dealing with things as much as possible before everyone's triggered and upset at each other. And the last thing to do, step number 5, is be very clear about what comes next. So again, remember that the anxiously attached person has a very big fear of uncertainty because they feel like they could be abandoned at any moment. So if you need space after a conflict, if you need some time to think things through, just let them know that and set a clear point where you will check back in. Again, that's just going to help them stay calm and not freak out about what comes next. And it gives you the space you need, if you need space, to think things over and figure out if there's anything you need to bring up in your next conversation, right? Maybe something about the way that the conflict went down hurt your feeling or made you feel a little bit rejected or blamed for something that you don't necessarily think is fair. And those are also things that you can come back to and have calm conversations around once you've both taken the time to kind of calm down and think things through. Real issues in relationships can almost always wait. I think that's something that's really important to keep in mind. If there is a true problem in your relationship, usually time and thinking about things carefully actually helps you solve it. So when things are very urgent, very intense, and everyone feels like this has to get worked out right now, it's probably because there's triggers present, right? That's how we feel when our nervous systems are activated and we're in fight or flight mode, right? And that's not the place that we solve problems from. That's the place we have to learn to downregulate from so that we can approach conflict in a clear headspace. Okay, that's all I have to say on this topic for today. There probably will be more follow-up videos on this because conflict between insecurely attached people is such a minefield and there's so much that needs to get unpacked and so many communication tools that can be used to help smooth this over. But for now, those are the main things to keep in mind. Make sure that you are addressing that fear of abandonment and working with the emotion above and beyond everything else, and it's really gonna help in those high conflict, really intense situations. All right. I love you guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, I hope you're taking care of yourselves and each other. And I will see you back here again really soon.